Hi, welcome back to another episode of Anyone Can Paint. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. This is dry now, so now we'll be able to put some highlights on and you'll be able to really kind of see it. I'm going to go with let's go with the large flat bristle brush. Remember to get it wet before you get it into your paint and dry it off pretty well. And I'm going to go right into yellow like we attempted to do last week. And this is where we're going to come up, and you're going to be able to see this a little bit better. And remember, we want to allow some darks to kind of show through. And this is going to go right up against our tree line. And you just kind of want to use this a little sparingly. Because wherever you leave some dark, that's going to trick the eye to think that that's some distance in there, because those could be low spots, little shadowed areas or whatever. But that's called contrast, is whenever you put lights up against dark. And in landscape, that translates over to your eye as distance on the ground. After I get this in, I'll put some of that burnt sienna, which I was talking about last week, and you can see how that can impact this. Again, sometimes you can probably hear it scrubbing a little bit. Sometimes I hit it a little bit harder, sometimes a little bit lighter. Just to kind of get a little bit of texture difference where the paint's a little bit thicker in some areas, thinner in some others. There. Now I'm going to clean out the brush, and then we'll get into a little bit of that burnt sienna. All right, to do this, now again, let me explain again why I do this. Sometimes when paintings have a lot of green, if you're doing a spring or a summer scene, there's a whole bunch of green. Sometimes green can be a little monotonous. So what I do once in a while, if there's a lot of green, is I incorporate just a little bit of burnt sienna. And again, this doesn't take very much. You can see on my palette, I pulled some out, but I'm just not putting very much on there at all. Then I'm going to come up, and then I'm just going to incorporate some of this into the green. And what this does is kind of warms this up a little bit. And I do this kind of sparingly. You don't do a lot of it. And this, you can interpret this as maybe this is some just different colored grasses that are back there, or maybe this is some dirt showing or whatever. But it just kind of warms it up again and just changes it a little bit so there's just not so much green. But if green doesn't bother you, don't do this part then. We're going to go ahead and clean out the brush. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put in our next layer of trees, and we're going to use our medium flat bristle brush for that. And we're going to go back to this blue and green color, and I'm going to blend this on the palette, roughly. It doesn't have to be a perfect one flat color, but and you want to get chiseled edge to it. Remember that how you get that is put your brush right in the paint, pull it through, turn it over, stick it in the paint, pull it through again, and that makes the paint go right down to the end of your bristles, and you get a really nice sharp little edge to work with. And that's what we're going to be painting with. We'll come up to the canvas. These trees are going to be a little bit larger and have a little bit more detail than those because, again, they're getting a little bit closer. So if you hold your brush on a bit of an angle, you just come in and you're just going to tap. And I'm just running these together, but you can see the points. But the body of the trees, again, because this is still far away, the body of the trees are all kind of still close together to each other, so they're not as distinctive, but you certainly want to see the tops and the points of the individual trees there. And just kind of go through this and vary the height. Again, this will kind of help make that look like there's a thicker stand of trees because there are various heights. And you can put this wherever you want, as much as you want. You can kind of, I'm just going to reload, I'll be right back. You can leave an area like that. You can come over here and you can put in a few there that maybe just a couple trees that are growing on their own. Don't worry about the bottom edge. Maybe over here we'll put in a couple. But it's really important to vary the height of these trees. If you make them all the same height, then it really doesn't look like trees. Maybe it looks like it's a fence line or something. So just kind of vary that. And again, that will trick the eye to think like there's just more than just one tree and it's just one row where they're all the same. And again, I'm holding my brush on a little bit of an angle. That puts pressure on the point of the bristles, on the point of the end of the brush, and it kind of keeps that point going, and it's just a series of very light touches. Just like that. We're just going to put a few stands of trees in there. In the bottom, you can just kind of lightly just blend out the bottom of that to where you just don't see it. And we'll clean that one out. Now we're going to go back to the large flat bristle brush, and we're going to put in highlights. So again, we're progressively working closer to us. We're going to go back to some yellow. You want to chisel edge that rascal too. You can just put your brush right in the paint, pull it through, and we'll come up to the canvas. Now we got to do the same thing as we did last week back here, is that we have to establish where the tree line and the grasses are. So you want to drop down a little bit and show a little bit more of the body of the tree. So as we come through, maybe we do something like that. And again, you can make this to be whatever elevation you want this to be. This can kind of go back like that if you want, and this scoots out where it looks like, let me get a little bit more paint so you can see this better. Looks like these trees are in front of that. And again, it's the same thing as we just did. Don't cover up all of your dark. But you can see by leaving a little bit more of the tree there, those trees look a little bit taller. So they look like they're closer. Again, we'll just kind of throw some of this around. I'm going to reload and I'll be right back. Just getting a little bit more yellow on the chiseled edge. And here's a good example of what we talked about earlier with that contrast between lights and darks. Right here you can see that clearly the lay of the land, the way that the land is angled, kind of goes like this. By bringing one across like that and making that lighter or brighter than what's behind it, it gives you that sense of distance and depth in there. So it looks like that comes forward and that goes back, and it's just another layer of distance that's in there. And it's really just by coming through and making where you're painting now and just kind of creating another mound or a hill, whatever you want to do, and making that brighter than what's behind it. And again, it tricks the eye to think that this is closer, and it pushes that back. And we'll just continue to work this color down. I'm going to get a little bit more paint, and I'll be right back. And we'll go ahead and clean out our brush from that. And again, if you want to add a little bit of burnt sienna to this, now's the time you can do that. Just again, you can use the same brush, just get a little bit of paint on here. You don't want a lot, because you don't want this to really blob up on you. And just kind of lightly hit this and just spread it around a little bit. You get a little bit more. And again, if you don't want to do this with your painting, feel free to just sidestep this step. But I just think it makes it look a little bit more interesting, because you got some different color changes. You got some brights. You got some other colors. It kind of helps warm this all up, and it just kind of makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. We'll go ahead and clean that brush out. And then we're going to switch to our small flat bristle brush, and we're going to put some highlights on those trees that we just did a minute ago. And we're going to go back to some yellow, and again, you want to get your brush to a chiseled edge. And then we're going to come up. Now this is again where it's really important that you really start paying attention to which direction the sun's coming from, because it's really easy to kind of get involved in this and not think about that, and you have highlights coming from both ways. I've done that before myself, so I kind of know. Light's coming from the left. Again, hold your brush on a bit of an angle, lightly touch, and keep bouncing your brush around, and don't necessarily get every piece of dark highlighted. I'm really doing the same technique as when we established these to begin with. Just hold your brush on an angle, and I'm just kind of lightly touching, and because of that angle, it puts pressure on the point of your brush, and you're able to maintain that point a little bit longer. I'm just reloading, and we'll get this next stand of trees. Again, just light touches. And if you're not sure about a light touch, you can always wipe a little bit of this paint off on a piece of paper towel or something before you do this. Just if you're not really confident that you can pull off a light touch. That way you'll have less paint on your brush, and you don't have to worry about blobbing it out on there or something. You know, I'm going to reload and just get that last little bit of stand that's back here. Again, you're just adjusting. These are still further away. But again, just like everything we highlight, you need to have some of the dark. In trees, it makes it look like there's thickness to the trees, like there's more than just one row of trees, because the ones that are dark are not getting highlights, and that makes them look like they're behind the ones that do. So you can go ahead and clean out your brush. Now in this meadow, there were some rocks that were laying around. Of course, Meadow rocks. So we got to put in some underpainting for some of the rocks that are back there. Now these are really small, and these will progressively get larger. Now you can change the sizes up on these if you'd like to, but remember that they're further away. So this is going to be some blue and brown, and you can just go half and half if you want to for the color, or if you want that color darker, add a little bit more blue to it. But this is your call. It's totally up to you. Now the thing about making rocks, you know, we're not going to blob all these in. It looks like there's a pile of them. These are going to kind of be scattered around, so we're kind of going to do some individual ones here. And the thing you want to guard against is just don't make the same size and shape over and over and over. You just got to make a good variety of these things. So we can start back here, and we'll just put a little bit there. And these are just wherever you want these to be. Maybe there are some rocks that are together more than one. And that's all we'll put from back there, and I'm going to start coming forward. And you can always darken this color up if you want by adding a little bit more blue. And we'll put some in here. And I'll probably do a few different ones that are in this bigger blob, but just get a nice little collection, something to work with. This again will kind of help get away from all that green, and we'll highlight those in a bit. Let's go ahead and clean that one out. I think the next thing we're going to do is start working on our mountains. Now, mountains are one of those things that as you start putting the highlights on, it's really, really easy to do too much, because after you first start going on this and you start putting these in, hopefully you'll start saying like, man, this is really cool looking, this looks pretty realistic. And it's so easy to keep putting them in, because you think the more I do, the better it's going to look. And there gets to a point where that's wrong, and you get too many, and it just gets busy, and all of a sudden all you see are highlights. Remember that your eye is always attracted to light, so it's going to go there anyways. So kind of do this kind of sparingly. I'm going to use the small flat bristle brush, and this is going to be white with a little bit of brown to it. And chiseled edge. Now how you do this to get some rugged looking mountains, you want to hold your brush way back on the handle. Again, this helps to promote a little bit of looseness and freedom in your strokes. And we're not going to do specific strokes, because really they're not angled like that or shaped like that. You want to go through And I'll do this in a second, but you want to go through and just kind of tap and twist your brush, and this will get some broken edges, and it helps to show some ruggedness to the mountains themselves. So remember, our light's coming in from the right-hand side, so I'm going to start right here just so you can kind of see it easier, but we're going to go through most of the mountain. And we're probably going to do this in steps. So this is a little bit of a process, but this will at least get us going. And you just come up, and it's just light taps. And sometimes what I do, actually it's most of the time, is I look for brush marks, color changes, and I sometimes will use those as guides to how to shape my mountain, because that way it's kind of just happening, and it's a little bit more relaxed way of doing it, and it just kind of happens on its own, and you just kind of go with the flow. That way, if you instead, a lot of people come in and do an angle, then they follow that angle, and then it looks like a series of stripes, and it's all the same angle all the time. And that kind of gets a little monotonous to look at sometimes. So you want to kind of change that up, and if you follow just little subtle brush stroke changes or color changes, those again will kind of happen all on their own. And then you can come back and you can thicken some areas up, make them a little bit wider to make it look like maybe that's the face of a mountain, this little jagged. But you want to keep changing your brush strokes and don't cover up all your dark. And just let that dark become your shadow. See how dimensional that is already? Again, just by not making specific strokes, but by moving your brush, twisting it around, and allowing some darks to show through. Now you can always go back if it's not exactly how you want it and change it up a bit. This is where hitting it really light sometimes is a benefit. Hitting a little firmer sometimes is a benefit. Making some wider strokes once in a while is nice. Again, this kind of just helps to promote that look of ruggedness when you get these broken edges. And this one back here, I'm just going to reload the brush. Maybe we can make that one, because I'm looking again. This is a perfect example of what I was talking about. This brush stroke on this particular one, you can see how it cuts in front of that one. I'm just going to use that. So I'm going to put some highlights on this, but I'm going to stop it so it looks like this mountain peak is behind this larger one. And again, it just happened. I didn't plan on doing that, but I just noticed that stroke doing that. So I'm just going to take advantage of that. And then we stop. And that one looks like it's pushed back there. Now we can come through and finish these out over here. But again, this is where it takes some willpower, and you've got to just tell yourself, stop. And again, I'm just kind of just twisting and turning my brush, just kind of poking and using the corner sometimes, just to get a variety of different strokes and different amounts of paint that go on there. And again, like I said, I'm just going to reload. This is a process, and we'll just start building on this. I mean, many of you may, if you get to this point, you may just like it the way it is and just say, that's fine with me. But you can see how it takes on that three-dimensional look. And again, you don't need to do a whole lot. You just need to bring out the highlights where the light's catching these peaks and these little ridges and things. I think I'm going to bring this down a little bit more here. Maybe this splits off. And we'll come in with some shadows, and we'll just add a little bit more to this. But hopefully you can really get a good good view of what that's like, not to overdo it. You just want to kind of, again, bring out some of the peaks and stuff, and just have the patience and the willpower to say, I gotta stop and hit that brake pedal. Let's go ahead and we'll work on these rocks since we've got this color and we've got the right size brush. Again, light's coming in from the right or the left-hand side, I'm sorry. Now these are very small, so you don't need to put a lot of detail to these. These are just a little bit, just want to suggest. Now if you don't like this color and you'd rather go to maybe like a grayer color, all you have to do is add a little bit of blue to this color and that will gray it down. It keeps it on the brown side, depending on how much blue you add to it. But you can actually change this to make it look a little bit different color if you want. But keep in mind too that acrylics dry a little bit darker, so these will not stay as bright as this. I'm just going through and just kind of lightly touching just to kind of suggest. Remember, these are further away. They don't need a lot. They just need to be brought out. And just like everything, don't cover up all your dark. That dark has got to be there to make it look dimensionalized. Let me get this one back here. And if you got some areas where there's a little bit blobs or larger blobs, you make it into 2 rocks. Just take some of that big block and just chop it in half. Again, just to suggest, and at this point, these don't have a lot of detail to them, but it's so important that that dark is in there. I'm going to get a little bit more paint. Be right back. This one's a little larger. And almost anywhere where you see a dark spot, like right there, is not a part that I had put down for a rock, but there's a little bit, you can see just a little bit darker. And again, these are just things that just will happen sometimes. All you got to do because of that dark, you just pull a light in front of it, now you've got a rock. As if you needed another one. But again, just suggest they're further away. You don't need to put a lot on this. Now the ones we have up front, we'll put a little bit more detail to because they're so much closer to us. Let's go ahead and clean that out. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start working on a next layer of pine trees, and these are going to be over on this side. So hopefully, as you're looking at your mountain, these weren't your favorite parts of your mountain because some of that could get covered up. I'm going to go to our medium-sized flat bristle brush, and we're going to go back into that blue and green. And this time you want it a little bit more on the bluer side, so it ends up being a little bit darker. Still needs to have green in it, though. And again, chiseled edge. Now these trees are going to be much larger than what those are because we're progressively getting closer to the foreground area. So these are going to come up into here. And how I do pine trees is have more detail. Chiseled edge, and I just get the top started because that helps me to get the height of the tree, and it places it where I want it to be in the canvas. These trees are going to be fairly close together. So I drop down a little bit using the corner of the brush only, light touches, and we're just going to work our way down. And this is going to come right into this area here. Now, when we get into the trees over here, these are going to be much larger, and we can talk about detail a little bit more. But this in here, these trees are going to be sitting on a bit of a hill, and they're still pretty close to each other. And they're going to be they're going to be in shadow for the most part. So you just want to get enough to get started. In the body of the tree, you can just bang this all in like this. And this is going to go on a bit of a hill like that. So you just put in actually as many trees as you want. You may want to consider reloading your brush after each tree so you can at least get a nice little sharp point to get it started. But again, in the body of the tree itself, don't worry about it. Just kind of pop this in. We're going to put some low lights, which are highlights that are on the shadow side, on these, again, because the light is kind of coming like that, and this is going to cast some shadows. So we're going to put one there, we'll put one in here, put one in there. And again, we'll talk more about this when we do those bigger ones, because these are still, even though there's a little bit more detail to them, there's not going to be as much as there will on those over there. And I just kind of follow the contour of how you want your land to go. So the trees still grow basically straight, but you may want to help with that look that they're going down by making your trees a little shorter so it looks like they're following the ridge of that hill. And we're going to let's put in just maybe one or two more. And this is probably all we're going to get in for today's episode, is just putting these in. But we got quite a bit done. We finished the highlighting back in the meadows. We'll put one more in here. We got our rocks in. We got those trees highlighted. So we certainly got the mountain pretty well too. So we're just going to go with this. And again, this is about as far as we get today. But hopefully this is starting to make a little bit more sense. And we'll clean this out. And I want to say again, thank you so much for watching. We appreciate you being with us. We'll see you next week. And remember,